The other day, you made a post about Pastor Appreciation Month. That's every October, and it's an underrated holiday. It's an underrated season
Well,
because
not everybody celebrates it.
right. Well, and pastors can't bring it up because it looks self-serving.
Yeah, that can be an issue.
It's like, hey, appreciate me.
Please appreciate me. Please appreciate me. And, it really isn't the place of the pastor to bring it up. Pastor Appreciation Month, I think it stinks that we even have it. like we have to put it on the calendar to
make sure
please
it
appreciate
happens.
your pastors.
Well, it's like Mother's Day and
Right.
Father's Day, right?
Right. Well, yeah. Well, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, though, pastor appreciation isn't something that should just happen in a month or during a special weekend. Pastor's appreciation, I think, is something that we should always walk in, you know? But you're right. There's no pastor on this planet that I know of that's healthy emotionally, that's going to stand in front of his people and be like, hey,
It's Pastor Appreciation.
it's Pastor Appreciation Month, so next Sunday you're going to be getting me a bunch of cards. I'm going to ask you for a bunch of money and checks and gift cards, and can you just encourage me, please? Because
it's like a grown adult putting on a birthday party for themselves.
yeah, it's like bring me gifts, bring me gifts. And and to be honest with you, no pastor desires to ask people to be appreciated. Because when you have to ask people for appreciation, it feels forced.
Yeah.
It feels a little gross when you do that. And so, here's the thing. Pastors have the hardest job, one of the hardest jobs, if not the hardest job on the planet. They're not respected in society the way that they were probably in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and even to a certain extent the 90s. I think as we have moved into a post-Christian society, pastors are standing on a stage and they're standing for truths that do not conform to cultural norms or patterns in this world today. And so, pastors are viewed, have one of the most difficult jobs in the world, but they're viewed as people who aren't some of the most respected people in the world at the same time. And so, being a pastor, it's lonely. You and your family are leading this congregation, and you are held to not just biblical expectations, which are good and right, as we should be held to in the ministry, but I think you're also held to some unrealistic consumer Christian expectations as well. If the volume of the music isn't right, if the type of music isn't right, if you accidentally misspeak during a sermon, God forbid.
You change the color of the wall.
Yeah,
or the carpet.
right. Like we're trained and we know what we want to say, and obviously we stand on biblical truth. But sometimes you misspeak or and then people just it takes so much time to gain the trust and the respect of your congregation, but it can be lost like that. And a lot of times it can be lost over things that are just petty and silly. So when it comes to pastor appreciation, I think it starts with just an awareness of all they're going through, what they've said yes to on your behalf, and what they go through throughout the week in order to make sure that you are spiritually fed, that you are discipled, that you are nourished, which, by the way, isn't fully your pastor's responsibility, right? There is this concept in the Bible that there is this expectation for you to spiritually mature and to move from milk to solid meats, well, what's the difference between milk and solid meats? Well, milk is given to a baby, and it has to be given to a baby. If it's solid meat, you're feeding yourself at that point. And so I think, again, we just put so much expectations on our pastors, on top of the expectations that they should rightly be maintaining. We put these unrealistic, consumeristic Western Christianity expectations on them as well. And man, I wish you all knew, in the midst of those crushing seasons of expectation, feeling like a failure from time to time, feeling like you're not measuring up, feeling completely lonely, I wish our people knew how much an encouraging word or a gift or a thoughtful action really meant to your pastors and their families. I really wish you knew like how much that keeps us going in the hardest times. To know that, oh, our people aren't just complaining, they're also encouraging as well. We are making a difference. I think it's really easy for us sometimes, just as parishioners, you go to a church, and I'm guilty of this too. I go to Cornerstone Church in Bethalto. I used to work there, and when I moved up to the district office, it's still pretty close, so my family and I still attend. And there's Sundays where I sit under Pastor Eric Scottberg's teaching, and he'll just preach this phenomenal word. And it's just so good. It's so rich. It was just what my spirit needed. And I will stand up and I will walk out feeling enriched and feeling thankful for the word, but never saying anything to my pastor about how good that word was. Now, look, we're not going to do that every week, because then it just becomes kind of like token or white noise and stuff. But every once in a while, I think it would be really good to hear how that word has moved you. Like, pastors just need that encouragement. They need to know that what they're doing matters, because guess what? It does. It matters. It matters so, so deeply. And that's why I put so much emphasis on pastor appreciation, Zach.
You have a folder of every note,
I do.
And everything that you've ever, any encouraging message.
Yeah,
like
I wish I had that.
It was a
I wish
text
I had that. I wish
or
yeah.
cards. Like, you have a folder of it all.
I do. I've held on to them. You know, me personally, I'm a words guy. So when people say nice things to me, it just fills up my soul. It makes me feel respected. It makes me feel valuable. Now, obviously, you know, as a spiritually mature individual, I draw my value and my worth from Jesus Christ. And if I never had any of that stuff, I would still have Jesus. And so there's that balance. But again, like, it's so great. Like, the Bible actually commands us to encourage one another. It says in other places, he who refreshes others will he himself be refreshed. And, you know, I mean, there's just this consistent and repetitive theme and expectation of just encouragement. Not just encouraging one another, but also encouraging and valuing your spiritual leaders and your spiritual authority. Because here's the thing that you need to realize. It's not just like that they're lonely. It's not just that there's a crushing weight of expectation that's placed on these men and women of God who we call pastors, but there's also very real and pointed spiritual attack on their life from Satan. Satan, the accuser. And so you have to understand that the enemy is always going to try and attack spiritual headship and spiritual authority. And a lot of times that paints giant targets on pastors' backs. It paints targets on our families' backs. It affects our health. It affects our mental well-being. It affects our emotional well-being. And so really, I don't mean to sound too corny here, but when you actually participate in pastor appreciation, you are on some levels engaging in spiritual warfare. You are. Because you're actually speaking life and truth into your pastors. Wow. When the enemy may be speaking lies and deceit and condemnation on your pastor's life. And you might not know this, but your words may have just kept them, now, may have kept them going for another couple of weeks. It's not on you, and I don't want to put this weight on any people in the congregation, and I certainly don't want to put this weight on like kids and
teenagers.
Like, right? Like, you're not responsible for keeping like your pastor's calling intact. Right. That's not on you. I'm not hanging that on you. But you can help, right? Like you can lift up those arms in a season where things are just weighted and heavy and miserable, and you can lighten the load just enough where it's just like, I can catch my breath. Oh, I matter. Yeah. You know, it's funny because I was just having a moment today. You know, I was kind of in my own feels, and I was like, man, you know, am I making a difference? Am I doing a good job as a district youth director? And I just had another friend of mine who is a district youth director, and he called me up, and it came out of nowhere, and it was a total God thing, and he just encouraged me. This man just blessed my heart. He spoke life into me. He said some very kind things about my family and about my ministry. And I'm telling you, it literally changed my attitude and my perspective. That's cool. This morning, I was a bit of a turd. I got that phone call, and now like just that bit of encouragement was enough to kind of create a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And look at things with a new and healthier perspective. That's cool. Do you think you can do that for your pastors? Do you think you can? I want to let you know, family, you do have the power to do that. You know, you do. So,
what are some ways, like, so obviously writing thank you notes, writing letters, the encouraging text, the phone calls, the saying things to them in person, but what are some other ways that students and really any churchgoers can show appreciation to their pastors?
Sure. Well, I think adults are pretty good at this. Yeah. We could all be better. But here's the thing. So let me just talk to you from my perspective as a youth pastor. In my years of youth ministry, I would say that 95% of the encouragement, the words of affirmation, the notes, the gifts, the gift cards, any little like
anything,
any little encouragement that was given to my family just to say thanks was given to me by an adult or given to me by a parent. Yeah. You know, it's like, thank you for ministering to my child. Right. And I'm like, yeah, you know, somebody had to. I'm kidding. But the most meaningful notes, the most came from adults and parents, but the most meaningful notes came from students. Wow. When we recognize our pastors, the ones who have a direct spiritual impact on our life, when we recognize, when we can testify to them, when we can say thank you to them, it's so deeply meaningful. It's so deeply meaningful because you're the ones that are sitting underneath my ministry. So if I'm in a youth group and I want to encourage my youth pastor and their family, here's what I'm going to do as a young leader in my youth group. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull some other students aside. I'm not going to involve any of the leaders. I'm going to be a leader. And I'm going to pull other students and I'm going to be like, listen, we need to encourage our youth pastor and our leaders and our youth pastor's family. We need to do something nice for them. So number one, all of us are going to write a note. We're just going to write something encouraging and we're going to take time on it. It's going to be a handwritten note. And it's not going to be, I like the way you dress. It's going to be, you're funny, you know, like it's going to be meaningful. All right. We all have the ability to do this. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to organize some type of offering. I'm going to say, guys, you're going to go to your parents or you're going to go to your bank accounts. You're going to withdraw $5, $10, $50, whatever you think. And we're going to put that all together, and we're going to give our youth pastor and their family a cash offering along with all of these notes. Because it's one thing to write something down, it's another thing to give back. So, I always say money. Give them money. And here's why. For students, that's such a big deal. And there's a lesson in this. When you give money, it's something that you could have used for yourself, but instead, you symbolically give it to your pastor in a way of saying, you could have done anything with your life, but you chose to invest it in us. We recognize that. And so now we're just giving you something that we could have invested in ourselves, but we're going to invest in you instead. It might be $20. It might be $100. It might be enough to get this youth pastor's family a meal at Dairy Queen. But it's going to be so meaningful.
Yeah.
It's going to be so meaningful to them. And I hope you don't think it's gross that I'm saying give them money. I get to say that now, right? Your youth pastors aren't in this for the money. So I get to say that. I get to say give them money because I know they're not in it for the money. Right. I don't know youth pastors that are like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a ton of money preaching to teenagers this week. That doesn't exist.
Right.
That's not a thing. They're like some of the most poorly paid people on the planet for what they have to deal with, especially. And that's you, students, right? Your youth pastor has to deal with you. That alone means that they need a raise. So I would just tell you, come together, do something meaningful, hijack a youth service. You can do this once a year for pastor appreciation. Your pastor, it would be so funny if your youth pastor thought that they were coming in to preach a message. But you're like, no, we're going to encourage the mess out of you instead.
And just do almost, it makes me think of a tradition that you did when you were youth pastor Andrew's chair, but
reverse it.
Yeah, reverse it to where instead of a night where you encourage the students as a whole and you take time encouraging individual students, that's what Andrew's chair was. But if you just made it about the youth pastor, it's like a reverse roast.
So here's what you do. If you want to do an encouragement chair for your pastor one night, here's what you do, students. You get a chair, you put it on the stage, and or multiple chairs, and you get the pastor and their spouse. Don't make the whole family go up there. Don't make the kids go up there, especially if they're in the youth ministry, because that's weird, right? But just have the pastor and their spouse go up in that chair, and then get in line, put a microphone on the floor, and just speak life. One after the other. Take 30 minutes, take 40 minutes, and just speak life. Just encourage them. Write a letter and be like, hey, I wrote this letter for you. Here it is. And just read it to them in that microphone. I promise you, you will absolutely
wreck them emotionally.
They will be a hot, sobbing mess at the end of that night. If your youth pastor is new, within a year, maybe the encouragement chair isn't appropriate yet, right? Yeah. Because you're going to be lining up and being like, hey, you've been here for 3 weeks, but man.
It's been fun.
It's been great. What I would do if it's a new youth pastor, so if it's somebody that's been there for less than 6 months, I think what I would do is I would still write notes to them, but just excitement about their leadership and lending your support and saying, I believe in your vision for this youth ministry, and I want to let you know that I am not going to be a diva. I'm not going to be a brat. I'm not going to leave when things get hard. I'm going to allow you to disciple me, and I'm not going to make you pay for it. So if you see me being a giant idiot, I'm going to believe that you've got my best interests in mind, and I'm going to allow you to call me out, right? So do things like that. And I think that would be very meaningful to that youth pastor as well, especially if they're new. One of the funniest things I ever got from a student, and this student will remain nameless, But if they are watching this, they're like an adult, they're married, they have kids now. But if they're watching this, they're going to laugh really hard because they will know it's them. But this individual is now married and has kids, but they were awful. They were like just the brattiest, most like entitled, most diva student on the planet. And I remember one of the most meaningful things I ever got from this young lady is she came up and she gave me an envelope. And she goes, "This is for pastor appreciation." And she walked away. Like, boom, put it in my hand
like
and
a
walked
drive-by,
Right.
like slap an envelope in your hand.
And so I folded the envelope, I put it in my back pocket. I was like, "Thanks," like to her back as she was walking away.
Whatever.
And I went home that night and I opened it up and there was a letter inside and it said, "I know that I've been difficult to manage, but I also want to let you know that you've made a tremendous impact in my life. I know it's slow to see change in me, but I want to let you know that change has happened. And I appreciate you so much." And then inside of this folded letter, there was like a bunch of like coupons, like, "Give this to me if I'm being a brat, and I'll stop immediately. Give this to me, and I'll have to bring $5 for Speed the Light next week. Give this to me, and I'll make sure that I'm not talking during service." Like, it was those. And I was like, I mean something.
Yeah.
It's working. It's
She
really
notices,
working. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And so there's a million different things you can do. I would tell you, students, to become experts in what your youth pastors and their family love. Become experts in their favorite candy.
food.
Be experts in their favorite restaurants. Be experts in like their favorite TV shows.
Their coffee order.
Their coffee order. Show up to church. Like if it's a summer day and it's hot, run by a Starbucks, pick up their favorite coffee and just drop it off to them and be like, "Hey, I was just thinking about you. Here you go, Pastor." Like, leave a bag of peanut butter M&Ms on their desk with a little note of encouragement just to say, "I think you're doing a great job." You know, just their favorite things. Just get to know what those are. And then from time to time, set reminders in your phone, like once every 3 months. Like, make it a once every 3 month occurring reminder. Encourage Pastor so-and-so today with something they love. Offer to babysit their kids and let your pastor and their spouse go on a date night without their kids.
Right.
And don't charge them.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
that'd
just
be
be like,
huge.
"Hey, free night of babysitting. I want to come and hang out with your kids so you and your spouse can go like walk around Target." I remember when I was a youth pastor. No, with young kids. I remember having young kids, and I remember being a younger youth pastor with young kids, and they were always such a handful. Like, there's no going to like Lowe's. There's no going to Home Depot or Target and it not being an absolute like dumpster fire.
Right, it's
you know
it's
what
a
I mean?
whole-on event.
It's a Sharknado.
Yeah.
Like, it's just everything's being grabbed. Everything's like they're screaming.
They're
this
crying,
kid just crapped himself.
running off,
You know, and
yeah.
it's just like who's taking care of it this time? I mean, Chloe, my daughter, literally vomited on my head in a Walmart line once. So
That was last week.
Yeah. She's almost tall enough to now. But no, so like even going and babysitting and taking the kids. Yeah. Like, and your youth pastors probably aren't going to be able to like afford to get anything at Target.
Well, like just the fact that they can go have a free night.
I remember like walking around, it was something like, maybe it was like an IKEA with my wife. And we couldn't afford anything, but we didn't have the kids.
That was
And
just
we were just
fun.
we were holding each other's hands instead of like pushing a shopping cart or holding a child's hand or holding a kid. And we just looked at each other and we're like, "Hey, is this a date?" And it was wonderful. So like little things like that
Yeah, that's
matter
cool.
so much, you guys. And I think, again, pastor appreciation is most effective when it's not on the schedule. this month, yeah, do something. Like, don't forget. Like, that's about as bad as forgetting Mother's Day. You know what I mean? You know you're going to hear about it. But it's more meaningful when you appreciate your pastors in the common hours and the moments when nobody else is looking and when nobody else expects it, because that's actually when they need it the most. So yes, do something for pastor appreciation, but also make pastor appreciation just kind of part of the culture.
A habit.
Ministry.
Yeah.
Make it a habit.